making some surprising additions to the list of things considered to be treats. The Roundup is next. The maker of Uncle Ben's rice and Dolmio pasta sauce is going to start putting labels on some of their products warning that they shouldn't be eaten every day. That story kicks off the Roundup. Nicole Verkindt is the founder and president of OMX, and we're going to start with pasta sauce. I love this story. Mars Foods, the parent to a whole bunch of brands, is saying that some of their pasta sauces that contain a fair amount of sugar and other things should be occasional treats instead of staples. This is a fascinating story to me. There's so much debate about food labeling and its effectiveness, but here's a company at least trying to get out ahead of the message on what's contained in their jars. What do you think?
Thankfully, it's about time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a data person. You can't manage what you can't measure. I've always believed that food is one area where capitalism starts to break down because all of these companies are incentivized to increase their margins, and sometimes the best way to do that is
add a little sugar.
Add a little sugar, add a little pesticide, add anything that,
I don't think there's pesticide in there.
Not in the pasta sauce, but in so many other products. So it's really one area where consumers don't have the information, and when they have the information, it's often really confusing. I mean, how often do you put up a pasta jar and you can't pronounce any of the words on a label? I mean, that's the rule. If you cannot pronounce the words, you should not buy it.
Right. I like the effort from a consumer awareness standpoint and from a company's responsible marketing perspective, but there's a deeper issue here, I believe, which is we've lost our ability to distinguish between a growth food and a fun food. Now, I have a 6-year-old that talks about this stuff all the time. Historically, pasta sauce was a growth food. It was like tomatoes and some garlic in there, and now we actually have to look at the label and say, wow, the amount of sugar in that is kind of like ice cream. And so it's very difficult to determine what's going to be good for you and what isn't.
Right, that's so true. And that was the example even in the McDonald's example, right? Their kale salad had more calories than the burger, but your brain doesn't really go to that place.
My other concern is the strategy is unproven on labeling. So New York has had has nutritional information on all of its menus, has for about 5 years. And the academic research says it actually doesn't make much difference. In the first couple of months, in the first year or so, people noticed
it. You have to relate it to what they understand, right?
Well, but
how many steps do I have to take if I eat this jar of pasta?
But people don't seem to be, even that level of information they're not actually using. So we would think that a rational consumer would say, wow, I've got this information now, I'm going to use it to adjust my behavior. And it doesn't appear that they are, which where it comes back to is parents. We need to ensure that our kids learn growth food versus fun food so that they can start to do that triage themselves.
Right.
Do you read labels?
Not really. One thing that's really interesting is one of my clients in the United States, they give people the ability to track their steps. And if they have so many steps, they get paid extra. And the thinking is, over the course of certain periods of time, it will reduce their health insurance costs. Right. And I got thinking, in Canada, it's mostly the government that's covering our health insurance, so maybe there could be tax credits.
Well, and there's a service called Carrot that's looking at the nudge here in Canada. I'm going to segue to a retail story, because this one is fascinating on so many levels. It's IKEA, and they're about to do a significant overhaul, which is interesting in and of itself, but what it calls to our attention is how that company is structured to begin with. So before I started researching the story, I didn't know that they were a nonprofit, right? That they have this enormous asset that has been structured in a tax-advantaged way that doesn't even have it be based in Sweden. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Your Billy bookcases?
Well, I buy the Swedish meatballs. I didn't know that they were actually Liechtenstein meatballs, maybe, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a surprising thing. And this restructuring is looking at, they're spinning it as a way to innovate, focus more on e-commerce, but there's a real tax element to how this thing is coming out. What did you make of that? Did it raise your antenna of questions of governance?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about tax havens and that sort of thing. This isn't illegal. I mean, this guy, the founder of IKEA, clearly has very expensive tax accountants and specialists that are optimizing the structure. But what concerns me with corporate tax and corporate tax being moved off into other countries is the amount that's not being reinvested back into the local country. I mean, we talked about Canada and trying to incentivize more reinvestment back into Canada. So in that case, that's more what concerns me than having a headquarters in Liechtenstein, because you would think that he's going to be reinvesting all those extra profits back into the corporation. The real problem is when something is secret, or when the founder or the president or some of the shareholders, after they take money out of the corporation, if they're not paying the proper personal tax.
So Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands are where these foundations are located.
It's all very complicated.
It is, and they're talking about selling assets to that parent, which sort of feels like a reverse takeover. It's all very odd, and the idea of IKEA is that it's simplicity and has a real, almost a socially responsible message. This seems to fly in face of that when they're so tax-oriented. No?
Well, they have very high margins. They're smart people.
Yep, they do have high margins, that is to be sure. This next story is interesting. It's airlines. You travel a lot. I travel a lot. There's a professor. He's based at McGill. He has had a website that has been aggregating complaints against United Airlines. You're cackling. It is kind of funny. We're going to bring up this website so you can see it. It dates back to 1996, almost 20 years, and there's a whole bunch of functionality here. My first thought in reading this story, and why it's coming to a head, is United is going after Jeremy Cooper-Stock in court. He's an engineering professor. They're facing off in court. But my first question is, what else could he be doing with his time instead of maintaining this website that is all about United's failures when it comes to customer service? What was your first impression?
It's definitely become a passion project for him. I laughed hysterically. I went to the website. It said, this is about United passengers crossed off victims. And
Right.
the whole thing was very funny. I mean, we're living in a Yelp culture now, and corporations need to be, I think the biggest sin that they made was not answering that first mail.
Yeah.
Right? That was the biggest sin. But in this case, what does this guy expect? I mean, there's so much competition in the airline industry. It's all about cost now. You don't see people creating websites for the Greyhound bus. I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to another place. You should complain if you don't get to the place the ticket says it's going to.
So of course, what I did, I searched him and found him on Rate Your Professor, which is
No kidding.
a feedback site on professors, and he scores 2.5 out of 5. Admittedly, some of these ratings go back a decade, and there are under 25 of them, but well below average. And here's the quote: "Big ego, unfair, but quite interesting." So that was the commentary on the prof. I think here's what I would credit him for above all else is stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah.
I mean, 20 years is a long time to carry a grudge. Can you imagine if he had a fight with his mother? He's probably not going home for Thanksgiving dinner. I don't know. You think?
Well, it's just amazing that he suffered from Yelp culture as well.
Yeah. And what United specifically is suing them for is he has contact information for lawyers and a lot of folks that are not customer
available.
Yeah, so they're concerned about that.
All right.
Yeah, all right. Okay, here we go. We got one more retail story here. It is Canadian Tire, and it's sort of a what is old, what becomes new again. They're actually going to be delivering a printed catalog to stores, which is pretty amazing. We've got some pictures on what this actually looks like. There's the catalog, but the big idea is that you point your phone at the catalog. There's image recognition, an image recognition software element to it that brings you to the catalog and gives you a whole bunch of value-added kind of stuff, like how to organize your front hall and all that kind of thing. I love a catalog. You're probably too young for consumers distributing catalogs. Do you remember those? Oh, it was the best.
This is the worst of both worlds.
Okay,
I get way too much paper already at my house. It doesn't even fit in the box. And I throw most of it out, so I don't want a catalog.
Right.
I want just an app. But there's people that are maybe older or they prefer a catalog, but they're not going to be that tech savvy. I actually think this will not work.
Well, it's interesting. I wonder if they'll cut through the clutter with clutter. Because,
exactly.
there's so few catalogs these days, and here, I think I would be surprised if it came to my door, because I actually don't receive a lot of catalogs, so I would be surprised to see it. And what I think they've said is, from a cost standpoint, it's actually not that much more expensive, because in order to develop the digital presence, they have to do most of the work on the catalog anyway, so they're printing it out. And
Well, kudos to them for being innovative. I love when companies start and try new ideas, but for me, instinctively, I don't like it.
Yeah, when you research something online, do you go for the ratings and the videos? Do you do that level of due diligence?
I do, yeah, but I do it all from my phone.
All from your phone?
Yeah, so shopping in retail will be a mix between physical and digital, but it won't be not in this way.
Well, there's the catalog. It's called the Wow Guide. We'll see if it works for them. Nicole, thank you very much.
Thanks, Bruce.
Well, stay